Students, this is Mr. Everton, and this is a video all about the origins of the Renaissance. Today we're going to talk about how the Renaissance began, and we're going to talk about what it is. And here we have a couple of sad ancient Greek philosophers, Plato and Aristotle. Can't believe that they haven't been talked about since way back in December when we learned about ancient Greece. Nobody in Europe remembers that they exist anymore. But wait, what's that Aristotle says? The Renaissance is about to begin. Tight. The Renaissance was an important cultural era in Europe, and it began in Italy, northern Italy, and then eventually it would spread to the rest of Europe. The Renaissance, just a brief definition, it's kind of hard to define in a few words, but it happened starting around 1300 and went to around 1600. There's no like specific day that it happened. And Renaissance is a French word, renaissance, which means rebirth, born again. What's being born again? Well, as Plato and Aristotle just indicated a moment ago, Greco-Roman culture is being reborn. All of the Greek and Roman achievements that we talked about earlier in the year, that all of the Europeans forgot during the Middle Ages while they were living in filth and trying to scrape out a meager existence for their feudal lords. Greco-Roman culture is now going to return as Europe becomes more affluent, more wealthy. This is going to mean a return of logic and reason, and it's going to mean a focus on individual people and their individual achievements. So we'll talk more about these ideas as we go. But let's talk about where this all came from. One thing that led to the Renaissance was the Crusades. Remember this map over here showing the routes that Europeans took to go try to take back Jerusalem from the Muslims? Well, we talked about one effect of the Crusades being that as Europeans went to the Middle East, they began to want Middle Eastern products. They saw all the spices and trade goods that were available in the Middle East, and they thought they were awesome. And they went back to Europe and they were like, oh my God, you wouldn't believe it. I ate food that had like pepper in it and it tasted really good. And all of the Europeans then desired these products. So that led to an increase in trade. Also, Crusaders came back having seen Arabic numerals. Remember, in the Islamic world, they had gotten a number system from India, and this number system led to more complex mathematics like algebra. And this meant that when Europeans got access to these Arabic numerals, they were able to begin using new banking practices. Numbers helped them to do better math, which helped them to keep track of their money. Shock. All right, so all of that helped the desire for Middle Eastern goods and the improvement in the ability to keep track of money and keep track of trade goods led to an increase in trade, and an increase in trade in turn led to the growth of cities. Because when you want to buy and sell things, the easiest way to do that is to go to a city where there are lots of people where you can buy things from them and sell things to them. It's hard to do trade when you're living in the countryside on a manor, farming for your feudal lord, because there's not a whole lot of people there to trade with. So people go to the cities to trade, the cities grow, and as trade becomes more common and more profitable, people begin to use credit in order to buy and sell things. Credit is a promise to pay for something. We think of credit as being a credit card. In this time period, credit meant like a letter that said, I promise that I will pay this amount of money. And one of the reasons for credit was just that like it's easier to have a letter that says, I promise to pay for this, than it is to have like sacks and sacks and sacks of gold coins, which weigh a lot and are hard to transport. And also, credit led to an increase in the supply of money. So there was even more money available to buy and sell things, which meant the economy grew even more than it would have already. Another important economic concept that led to the Renaissance was usury. And usury is the idea that when you lend somebody money, you charge them interest. That seems to make sense, right? Usury just is like, oh, I'm going to lend you some money. I'm not going to just do that out of the goodness of my heart. I want to get something in exchange for it. But the church, the Catholic Church, thought that this was really bad and that this would lead to predatory lending practices. Basically, like bankers were going to take advantage of people and loan them money at an interest rate they couldn't pay back. And so they outlawed it. And people in Italy who wanted to be doing this, bankers, decided that they didn't like the Catholic Church that much and that they were going to do it anyway. So usury, when it was outlawed by the Catholic Church, led the church to lose influence as wealthy Italian merchants decided that they wanted to be making as much money as they possibly could. Again, shock. All right, so all of this led to the development of some key Italian city-states in northern Italy. Here they are on the map, surrounded in red circles, as is my wound. We've got Venice, Genoa, and Florence. And these three Italian city-states were three of the most profitable and wealthy, and they were also three that were incredibly influential during the Renaissance. And they happened to all be located on trade routes. Genoa, you can see here on this map, is located on trade routes which connect Western Europe to Constantinople and North Africa. Venice, also located on trade routes, and Venice is known for its canals. Here you can see a picture of Venice with its famous canals and people riding in them in gondolas. How scenic. Here's a medieval painting of the same thing. Florence is another really important Renaissance city in Italy, which was known for textiles and banking. And here is a picture of a famous Florentine cathedral called Il Duomo. It has another name, but everybody else just calls it Il Duomo, which means the dome, because it's got a dome. All of these city-states were governed as democratic republics. Remember democratic republics? Rome was a democratic republic. That means that you elect people to make decisions for you. It's a democracy. So democracy is part of the achievement of ancient Greece and ancient Rome, and it's being reborn in Italy. Imagine that. Eventually, however, these democratic republics began to be dominated by wealthy families. And unfortunately, this man's name is cut off, but it's Cosimo de' Medici. And the Medici family is probably the most famous example of a wealthy Italian family that took control of an Italian city-state during the Renaissance. They took control of Florence. And one of their advisors was named Niccolò Machiavelli. And you need to know about Machiavelli because Machiavelli wrote a very important book called The Prince. The Prince is a guidebook that Machiavelli wrote for rulers, just like a guidebook that tells rulers how to rule successfully. So it's a very influential political book, and it says that a ruler or prince must protect his own power, that in order to do anything, the prince has to have power, and so he has to protect that power. That the prince must do good when possible, however, they must do evil if necessary. So Machiavelli was very focused on like being practical before being good. That a prince had to be willing to like do bad stuff. That they shouldn't just do bad stuff whenever, but they should do it if they have to protect their power. A famous line that sums this up pretty well is the ends justifies the means. If you're trying to accomplish something good, then it's okay to get that thing to happen in a bad way. Like you can break the rules and kill people and do terrible things as long as the ends is worth it. The end is worth it. As long as you're trying to benefit a lot of people with your power. Can't make an omelet without breaking eggs, I think is another way of saying this. Sorry, eggs. We need an omelet. All right, so to summarize. That feel when you realize there are only 4 vid notes left. It's really heartbreaking. Today we talked about the Renaissance and how it's a rebirth of Greek and Roman culture. We talked about usury, which is charging people interest when you loan them money. We talked about credit, which is promising to pay for something later. We talked about Italian city-states of Genoa, Florence, and Venice. And we talked about Machiavelli's The Prince, a handbook for how to be a good ruler. Thanks very much for watching, and I will talk to you next time. Maybe I'll keep talking to you because the thing doesn't want to stop. Where are you going to stop? Oh, I think I got it.